Hi, I'm Claudette with They Call Me Martha, and I'm back with another quick video to show you how you can use washi tape or paper scraps to create a quick and easy card. Let's start by going over the supplies I'm using for today's card. I'm doing an A2 size card, so I've cut a top folding card base, and the finished size of an A2 size card is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I have a card panel that is cut to 4 by 5 1/4, so just slightly smaller than my card base. And then I have a piece of sheet foam that's cut just slightly smaller than my card panel. You can also use foam tape or pop dots, whichever you prefer. I do have a sentiment strip that I'm planning on incorporating in my design, and I will be making a very quick and easy embellishment. You can use a pre-made embellishment if you have those on hand. And the star of the show in today's card is washi tape, or you can also use your scraps that you may have left over to create this cute card. So let's go ahead and get started. I plan on building 2 different cards, one with the washi tape, one with the paper strips, so you can see how each of them come together. They're very similar. So when picking washi tape, you want to put together a mix of both patterns and widths, and then you want to try to have a cohesive color story. In this case, I think these 5 are from Simple Stories. I don't believe they're from the exact same line. In fact, I'm sure of it because this is actually from one of their travel collections. I think maybe Let's Go. And then the florals are from a couple of different collections. And then I went ahead and added in 2 additional tapes because I was looking for something both sparkly and another narrow strip. So these are from, I think the gold is Teresa Collins and the teal is just like a generic brand. But you can see here I have a nice color story where things coordinate, and I have a variety of different widths that I've put together to make this card. I think it adds a lot of interest if the tapes are slightly different. All right, so I have my card base, and again, this is 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm going to start with one of my wider washi tapes, and I will be extending my washi tape off the edge, so you'll see why in just a moment. And I'm going to start by pulling my tape, and what I want to do is line it up from corner to corner all the way across. So take your time and make sure it's straight, because this first tape sets the foundation for all that follow. So here I'm going corner to corner, and then I'm going to tear my tape off the edge of both of those corners. So I'm going to give that first washi tape a good press. The reason why I run my tape off the edge, well, there's really 2 reasons. The first is it helps secure it to my desktop so that it's easy to work with and my card won't shift around. And then also when I'm working with washi tape, I like to tuck my edges underneath so that they don't peel up. So we'll do that at the end. But that's why I run it off the edge. When we work with the paper strips, we will run them off the edge but end up trimming them down. And I'll show you what that's like when we get to that card. All right, so I'm going to move to my next washi. And what I'm doing here is I'm mixing up the widths. So I'm just going to run it right next to my first tape, making sure that there's no gap. There's also no overlap. And then go ahead and tear my tape off the edge. And I'm going to keep going by filling in all of the other washi tapes. And I'll show you how I finish this cute card. All right, I have finished laying down all of my washi, and you can see here I really varied my patterns as well as the widths of my tape. And then I find that the easiest way to pick up your design is to work with a spatula. This happens to be my Cricut spatula. If you don't have one of these, I just recommend carefully kind of finding the edge of your card base and working to kind of pry it up from your work surface. This is what the back looks like, and with washi tape specifically, I do like to wrap my tapes, and this is so they do not peel up along the edge. So I'm just going to work my way around the card and bring these washi tapes in, and if I need to trim any of them off, I can do that now. I do save my corners until the very end so I can trim them a little bit. All right, and then with my corners, I just trim them down a little bit in case when I wrap, they're a little bit too long and would stick through on the opposing side like that. I'm just going to trim that off just a slight bit. Right, I have my panel all done, and as you can see, because I wrapped my washi tape all the way around the edges, I get this really beautiful finished look, and then also I know that my tapes aren't going to peel up. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is to apply my foam, fun foam or foam strips, whichever you have. When I'm working with a large span, I do like to use sheet foam or fun foam so that the card is more stable. You can find this in your craft store, generally in the kids section. And I believe some scrapbook manufacturers are starting to make sheet foam now, so it's becoming more readily available. Sometimes you can find it with adhesive already on. In this case, I've just added 1-inch double-sided adhesive to both sides. And then I'm just going to center my foam on my card base, just like that. And now I'm going to work with the front of my card, and let me bring in my example here and show you what I did. So I added a sentiment strip across the bottom, and then I've just made a very simple embellishment here. I'm going to show you how I made that in just a second. So let me show you how I did this. I had previously printed and foiled a sentiment strip here and cut them down, and I usually keep them in a drawer like this. So when I'm making sentiment strips, I'll make a bunch of them, and then I'll just put them in this little drawer so that when I need one, I have one ready to go. Here's some more from the same one that we're using today. So it just makes it really quick and easy. So I just pulled one out of my stash here, and unfortunately, it's not in the right place for my card design. I wanted to put my little embellishment off to the left, and if I do that, I'm going to cover up part of happy. So I'm going to show you how I fix that. What I'm going to do is measure about where I would like my sentiment strip to land, and then I'm going to trim this off and use this salvage piece over here. You're not going to see the seam because we're going to cover it up with our embellishment. So here I'm just going to come back in and trim off. So I've trimmed that off, and now I'm just going to add it to this other side to extend my white space to make room for my butterfly. So I'm just going to use a small piece of double-sided adhesive to hold that down. And again, you're not going to see this seam. It's going to be covered by our little butterfly. I'm just going to trim off that excess adhesive. Now, if your sentiment strip worked for you in your design all the way across, you could obviously skip this step, but I'm just showing you kind of how I do a little card surgery just to make this work for me. So I know I want that sentiment to go along the bottom. I am going to use a T ruler just to help me line that up. And I'm going to, I think I'm going to use wet adhesive so that I have a little bit of wiggle room. So here I'm just using some art glitter glue just to add a little bit of that wet adhesive to the back of my sentiment strip. And now I can remove this liner on this little piece that was holding our sections together. And then I'm going to place this, I'm thinking maybe just shy of an inch from my bottom edge. So a T-ruler is nice because it really helps you line it up. All right. And now I can go back in and trim off this extra. If you flip it over upside down, it shows you exactly where you need to cut. Okay, and then for my butterfly embellishment, from my stash, I pulled out these layered butterfly dies from Fawn, and I'm going to run these through my die cut machine once with the outline in vellum and the detail and the center using Simon Says Stamp matte gold cardstock. And I will be right back. All right, I have my pieces all cut out here. And now we can finish assembling our cute little card. All right, let's go ahead and assemble our little butterfly. I'm going to add a little bit of wet glue down the middle of my butterfly front, and then add my body that I cut out of the gold. This is such a fun die set because it has so much detail and it goes together so easily. Let me show you another version of it. So here's another version I made using obviously different papers, but you can see how it cuts all three layers separately. And so you can do some color blocking if you want, use fancy papers, kind of whatever you want. In this case, I wanted to keep it simple, so I cut my base out of vellum and then my detail out of this gold. And this is going to glue right here in the middle. All right, one other detail I'm going to add this cute little pinstripe that's on the top and bottom of my sentiment strip. And to do that, I'm using a product called Peel-Offs. They are from a company called Love from Lizi from the UK, and they sell a variety of finishes and colors in these really beautiful pinstripes. I'll go ahead and link them in the video description below. They are just so easy to use. Here I'm going to peel one of them up and add them to either side of my sentiment strip. And it just adds a really beautiful finishing detail. So it's just a big sticker, and I have found that the quality of the adhesive they use is really, really good. I've never had any of them peel up. So, and then I have a piece that's relatively long here, so I'm going to add it back to my carrier sheet. I can use it for a smaller project. And I'm going to pull up another of the peel-offs and add it to the opposite side of my sentiment strip. My favorite way to use these peel-offs is actually to join two different pattern papers together. I think it adds a lot of really nice detail. Okay, so I have my sentiment strip and my detail striping all done. And now I'm going to come back in and glue my butterfly now that it's all dry. And I'm just going to add it right over the sentiment strip, covering up that little extension that we did on the left-hand side. And then when this is all dry, you can come back in and lift up these wings if you want to give it a little bit of extra dimension. All right, now I'm going to bring my card base back in, and just going to make sure that my fold is on the left side. And then I'm going to remove the adhesive liner on the back of my foam. And this cute card is all finished. All right, I'm just going to make sure I have an even border all the way around. And then if you wanted to coordinate the inside of your card, you could come back in with some of that same washi tape from the front and just add in that detail. Here, I'll just do a couple. Okay, and in this case, we cannot wrap the tapes because they would show on the back. So I'm just going to trim them off. Easiest way to do that is to flip it over so I can see exactly where I need to cut. And then make sure you give that a good press. If it's peeling up on you at all, you can put just a little dab of wet glue underneath. But now the inside of your card coordinates with the front. And this cute card is all finished. Let me show you how you can achieve the same look using your paper scraps. So I'm just going to move over to some scraps that I have cut out. And this, we're going to put together the card exactly the same way, except this time using our scraps. So I recently did a video using this really cute paper by Simple Stories. I think it was called, I think it was Summer Living or Summer Vibes, something like that. I'll, if I can find it, I'll link it in the description below. But I had a bunch of these just varying widths of strips of paper left. And so this is the perfect way to use those scraps to achieve the same look that we did with washi tape. So if you're using 6x6 strips, you'll find that the strips are not long enough to go all the way across the span of the card. So I'm going to show you how to fix that here in just a minute. We're going to end up covering up the seam. But what you want to do is, just like with the washi tapes, is you want to have a variety of patterns that go together, and then a variety of different widths of paper. So you can see here I have some wider strips, some more narrow. And then I want to kind of mix them up so that I get a variety all the way across the card. So as we start to glue them, you'll see where we have some pieces that we can cut off and add to the corners if we need more strips. But all of these papers coordinate because they came out of the same paper pad. That's generally a really good way to know that your patterns are going to match. And so I'm going to start out with my red paper because it is the color I want to be most prominent in my card. And so I'm going to start by trimming this piece just in half. Then what I want to do is to create my guideline. And so I'm using my ruler to line up corner to corner and just make a very, very light line all the way across. This is where I know that my paper strips will line up nice and evenly. If I start with this one, I'll want to be able to finish it off down this way and make sure that they all line up. So once you have that first line, you can start building. And again, my paper strips were not long enough, so I cut it in half. If you're working with longer strips, obviously you would not need to do that step. What I'm going to do is start by lining up that first corner. I'm making sure that I'm extending off the page. And then I'm going to add the second piece. And working with wet glue will allow you some time to kind of move it around, make sure that it's straight. Okay, so we've started off there with our first line. We're going to cover up this middle, so don't worry about the part that has a gap. And so the next piece I want to add, I'm likely going to have to do the same thing. Yep, because it's not long enough. So I'm just going to cut this one in half as well. And I'm just going to add this one along the edge of the red paper. And then the other part. All right, now I know all the rest of my strips are going to fit. They're long enough to span the paper. So I think the next one I'm going to do is actually one of these florals. And you'll see as I go to embellish this card at the end, this little floral strip was kind of the inspiration for how I chose to finish this cute card. All right, I'm just going to continue by adding in my paper strips on both sides. All right, a little tip here is I'm working toward the smaller sections of my card base is I can actually trim off some of these pieces and transplant them up here. So I'm just going to turn this over and start that trimming process now. So again, I can pick up some of those smaller strips and continue my design. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and trim off the rest of the overage all the way around. I do not recommend wrapping your edges like you did with the washi tape. I think you'll end up with a card base that will be a little bit too thick around the edges. So in this case, I'm just trimming them off. I've glued down these strips anyway, so there's no risk of them peeling up like you would have with washi tape. All right, there's our card base. I'm just going to give that a nice press all the way around. And then just like our washi tape version, I'm going to come in and add some sheet foam to the back. I planned on using a craft colored card base for this card, so that's why I went to the kind of tan colored foam here. But you could use white all the same. Okay, and I'm just going to center this. All right, now let's work to embellish this. What I did is I went through my stash and I cut out one of these little book plates out of craft paper. And this, as you can see, will cover up that gap that we have. I was thinking I was going to pop this up a little bit with some sheet foam first. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to the back. All right, I'm just going to add that little bit of sheet foam to the back. And you can see that pops it up and it looks really nice. And then I thought I would add some floral pieces to this book plate. And as I mentioned earlier, I used the floral colored patterned paper in this collection to create all of my little flowers that I made. And what I thought I would do is use the same colors and kind of match up, where I have blues and yellows and pinks, and use that for our embellishment on the front of our card. So in addition to my flowers, I stamped and cut a sentiment from the same collection as I used for these flowers. This is a set from Simon Says Stamp. It's called Flower Happy, and I think it was their July card kit that I pulled that from. And I did also cut 2 additional pieces of this same die cut so that I could glue them and stack them together for some extra dimension. So I'm just going to glue those together with some wet adhesive. And you want to make sure that you take your time and line up all of those edges. And then add in our final sentiment. And then this can be glued right in the middle of our little book plate here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and glue our book plate down to the middle of our card panel. Then I want to adhere this to my card base before I start adding my flowers. So here I've cut an A2 size. It's a top folding card base. In this case, I'm turning it on its side because my card is horizontal. And I'm just going to remove my adhesive from my foam and position this in the middle of my card base. Okay, and now all I have to do is glue in my flowers. So my ones with the little pop dots already have adhesive on them. So I'll start with those, and then I will use wet glue to add some flowers without popping them up. Okay, and then just like our washi tape card, if you have any of those paper strips left over, you can add them to the inside of your card just to kind of coordinate it. So I have some bits and pieces left here. I'm going to do the exact same thing. Okay, and then I'm going to turn these over, give them a little trim. And then one little finishing detail I thought I would add here is just some faux stitching using a white gel pen around the perimeter of my book plate. All right, we've made our cue cards using the washi tape and paper scraps using the exact same technique. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial today. If you did, please do consider giving me a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel to see more content like this in the future. Have a wonderful day.